the announcement that the Corporation for Public Broadcasting will, for all intent and purposes, cease their operations in September, maybe a few staffers lingering into the next calendar year. And not just that, but the Trump administration and the Republicans in Congress, through the rescission bill, are going to be clawing back a little over $1 billion from the Corporation of Public Broadcasting that was already passed and signed into law by a previous Congress and a previous president. I know our friend Jane Matt Nair on Air, had our friend Robert Pilot of Native Roots Radio that plays out on this network, how it might affect uh, Native radio as well, because that's part of public broadcasting. But right now we are being honored to be joined by two guests for the rest of this half hour. Our first guest, Sarah Ashworth, is the director of Wisconsin Public Radio, and our second guest is the director of PBS Wisconsin. For those of us again of a certain age, grew up with Wisconsin Public Television, but now goes by PBS Wisconsin. John Miskowski, Sarah and John, thank you both very much for joining us via StreamYard today, and welcome to the program.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
It's our honor, as we like to do for people who first appear on the program. Start with Sarah, then go to John. Tell us just a little bit about yourselves, where you grew up, and how you ended up in this field of broadcasting.
Oh, sure. Hi, everyone. I grew up in Minnesota, actually, across the river in Minnesota. I've been in Wisconsin now for 2 years. I have a lot of family who is in Wisconsin. Wisconsin was a state we would visit when I was a kid. And WPR was a station I knew about for the last few decades. It's just one of those stations that has been around for 108 years. People across public media talk about it as Wisconsin has something special going on there. And so it was a station I always paid attention to. I came up working in newsrooms. So I was a reporter, I was a news director, I was an editor, I was a producer on a talk show, a couple of different talk shows, actually, and then moved into management. And I was at Vermont Public right before this. But I've worked at 5 different stations in the Midwest and New England area predominantly. But I'm really happy to be what I consider home in the upper Midwest now and at WPR.
Very good. I appreciate it, Sarah. John?
Well, I grew up in Stevens Point and had the delusion, I think, that if I came to school in Madison, I might discover, a career or something like that. And it turns out I did. And that was while I was in school. I started volunteering at then WHA-TV, then later Wisconsin Public Television, now PBS Wisconsin, and started volunteering, and then had a part-time job. Primarily, my career has been in fundraising, including 4 years at WGBY in Springfield, Massachusetts, which was a great experience, being the sister station to WGBH in Boston. I'd say the focus and things that I'd talk about in my career has been really the Wisconsin focus that we have identified as a focus of our work at PBS Wisconsin. So projects like our veterans projects, our World War II, Korea, Vietnam veterans programs, and community engagement. Projects like Hometown Stories are something that's coming up right around the corner. Quilt Show. That was an idea that Nancy Zeman created for our friend who has passed, but that lives on, and is really involved with Nancy and a few other people building that as well. So those are kind of some of the highlights of my work over those years.
When I think of now PBS Wisconsin and also Wisconsin Public Radio, I think of my childhood, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and Sesame Street. Certainly. Also, I'm back in the day in public schools in Wisconsin where they would roll in the television on a cart and turn it to PBS, and there'd be like social studies programs on there. That was part of the learning back in the day. When I think of Wisconsin Public Radio, I think of working on high school and college painting sets for musicals, and it would be tuned to WHHI Highland, and that would be the background music that you listen to, and I'm a huge Garrison Keillor fan. So these are things that are foundational to me growing up, but I know I share that with a lot of Wisconsinites. Let's just have a roundtable discussion. John, then Sarah. I mentioned this at the top of the segment. Corporation for Public Broadcasting, for all intent and purposes, gone after next month. How is that going to impact for those of us around Wisconsin who are concerned about your two institutions? What is your first knee-jerk take? How is these cuts to a Corporation for Public Broadcasting going to affect PBS Wisconsin, John?
Well, let me. I'll describe my two major concerns, and one is that federal funding has been core to the innovation and creation of children's programming. Daniel Tiger is this amazing, continuation of Fred Rogers' legacy. I have a 4-year-old granddaughter. You take whatever kind of almost any issue she's dealing with, we know that show has a show about that. We know from her, and we know from other parents, that show really helps children manage their emotions, find solutions, and things like that. So that main driver of that investment that prepares children for school. We have what I've heard described as a reading crisis in this country. It's just a little frustrating to think that this proven service that is tested and is designed for kids to learn and succeed and be prepared for school, that has so sort of lightly kind of been defunded. Now, there are some effort to refund that, but that's one thing that I would say is a priority. And then next thing across the country, and I know you asked about PBS Wisconsin, but the next thing that I would say is rural service. If folks understand, like what you had mentioned, tribal radio stations, especially if you look at places like Alaska, those radio stations are literally a lifeline for people. So that bringing news and information to rural areas, and certainly Wisconsin is included in that. So that is one of the key things that federal funding was designed, was to see that this was a universal service. One of the consequences is for larger organizations like ours is if those rural stations can't survive this cut, that means the dollars that they bring in through their community then are not shared with the system. So not only do we lose the federal funding, we start to lose partners who share the dollars that we put into national programming. So to me, those are the two critical things, but there's a number of other things. But those are the two things that are to me the most concerning things.
We're discussing the cuts to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting in Washington, D.C., and how it will affect broadcasting, public broadcasting in particular. Wisconsin, our guests are John Miskowski, PBS Wisconsin, and Sarah Ashworth, the director of Wisconsin Public Radio. Sarah, same question to you. Looking at the cuts in D.C., how is this going to impact Wisconsin Public Radio directly?
Yeah, and what John said, we are so closely connected, WPR and PBS Wisconsin. We work together in so many ways. We look at our budgets together. So this impact affects both of us greatly. There's a significant impact on WPR and PBS Wisconsin and the other stations in the state who receive CPB funding. What John said around rural access, the CPB money helped ensure equitable access to everyone across the country, no matter your circumstance, no matter what you can pay for, no matter where you are in the country. CPB helped make sure that public media reached you. And that could have been through a program like Daniel Tiger. It could have been through the news service that's offered through NPR or from your local station. I think the statistic is somewhere like 98 to 99% of Americans can access public media. CPB ensured that was the case. So I think we don't know fully the impact of what that access may look like going forward, because it's those smaller remote areas that are far harder to get the broadcast infrastructure to support reliably over time. The donor base who can support stations in rural areas is just naturally smaller than in larger metropolitan areas. So the sustainability for those stations. So the impact is great across the country. And then here in Wisconsin, To put numbers to it, for PBS Wisconsin and WPR, and again, we are services of UW-Madison and the Educational Communications Board. So we look at our budgets across the entire partnership we have that it takes to put public media out statewide in Wisconsin. It's about 10.4% of our budget, and that's about $6 million. So we're now starting to plan for what we look like, how we sustain ourselves with that loss in public funding. And I think that private public partnership there's a lot of pride in that we work together to sustain this service. Lots of people contribute to make WPR and PBS Wisconsin what they've been.
So I'll put it in Todd terms, the federal funding basically from Corporation of Public Broadcasting, roughly you're saying 6%. Is that basically for both PBS Wisconsin and WPR?
No, across.
It's slightly in excess of 10%. And it's about $6 million. I mean, it's in the neighborhood of $6 million. That is very significant. I mean, any business can think about what $6 million means. It's a significant.
And I think we had some people email in, knew you guys were coming on. So I think one of the questions in Wisconsinites' minds is, all right, so you're an entity, basically you're a subsidiary or a part of UW-Madison. So the crises, if I could use that word, maybe not too melodramatic, at both PBS Wisconsin and WPR, is it caused by predominantly the Republican-controlled legislature not funding the university system well enough, which those monies get put into your two entities? Is it the fact that the federal funds are drying up, or is it the fact that not enough people are giving during the pledge drives, or a combination of all of that?
It's not a combination of all of that. The legislature in Wisconsin and the university have been very supportive of public broadcasting. That has continued this year. Certainly that was, that is something we need to prove year after year, just like our federal funding. Community support for radio and TV are both up. And so that has been encouraging and looking really good. It is the federal funding that has created this financial situation.
And our state funding has gone through in the coming budget, and the state funding goes through the Educational Communications Board that supports the broadcast infrastructure in the state, the emergency alert systems that we have. It does not go toward the programming on WPR or PBS Wisconsin.
And I think, and we got about a minute and a half here. We can pick it up on the other side. But Sarah, for WPR, some of the frustration I think from listeners was that we're already. Oh, I'm sorry. See, this is why I gotta have a good producer.
We'll come back
30
to
seconds.
Right?
We'll come back. We'll ask on the other side a couple of tougher questions, maybe why some of these cuts were made before the cut to the federal level, and what that means for listeners across Wisconsin. We're talking public broadcasting on the All Ball Show, along with Mr. Rogers and Arizona's on the Civic Media Radio Network. I could listen to this music all day long. I'm a huge jazz guy. And jazz was caught down on the square last night in Summers. I went up after work. They're playing jazz outside. Perfect night for that. Welcome back to the All Ball Show on the Civic Media Radio Network. A little jazzy version of Mr. Rogers. 8 minutes before the hour of 3 o'clock, the top of the hour, ABC or CBS News, depending upon which of our great stations you're listening to. A check of weather. Mike Clemens with a sports update. See how Jordan Love is doing after that thumb surgery. And then hour number 2, a little what's worse for you, car colors in the goofy and nonsensical in hour 2. Right now, very serious. We serious to a lot of us across Wisconsin. We appreciate our two guests this hour, half hour, the director of Wisconsin Public Radio, Sarah Ashworth, and the director of PBS Wisconsin, John Miskowski, join us via StreamYard. Sarah, I want to pick back up with you. Certainly these changes disturbing to people like me in Washington, D.C., these cuts. But I think for a lot of listeners across Wisconsin, there was some frustration, quite frankly. And you folks at Wisconsin Public Radio put out announcement. Several shows, all things considered, Doctors Overpass. There were a lot of cuts to a lot of favorite programs and personalities before these federal cuts were announced. And so I think the question for a lot of people was this proactive? Were there problems inside of WPR already? Or was it a lack of state funding? Why all these cuts? Because it's really disturbing for a lot of people to lose those local Wisconsin programs and personalities.
Yeah, no, I understand that question, and to have four programs end at one time since COVID. So I've been at WPR for 2 years, moving here 2 years ago, It was around COVID, though, that listener patterns started to change. Your commute wasn't there in the same way for most people. And so we saw changes in audience, in listener habits, how people were accessing information, what they wanted to listen to. And we saw declines in membership. We saw declines in audience, not immediately, because there was a lot of vital information that public radio was distributing and audiences were high. But in the last few years, we did not see a rebound back to where we had been. And so since COVID, WPR was operating with a budget deficit and it was not improving. And we were using reserves that we had built up over time and with a lot of donor support and member support in order to have those reserves. But we were using those for the last 5 years or so and recognized that we couldn't continue to operate that way, and that the threat around loss of CPB funding was real. And we have felt that threat for the better part of the last year, and known that it was something we want to be prepared to weather. And so in June, we announced that we were ending 4 programs and making staff reductions, laying people off related to those shows, and then in a few other areas. To focus our service, we are prioritizing our service to Wisconsin and the programming and the stories that are about and with and for Wisconsin. That's what you will see WPR focus on in the coming years. And programs like To the Best of Our Knowledge are wonderful hallmarks of public radio. They've made an impact globally. They're well-produced, wonderful programs. A program like that was just something we financially could not support going forward.
Quick answer, if you would, please.
Yeah.
Is it that, and we see this in our company, others as well, this online or podcasting or listening to it on demand. Is that something that Wisconsin Public Radio is looking at doing to improve listenership and those types of things?
Yeah. We definitely see, we have a daily news podcast called Wisconsin Today. It's just a few minutes long each morning. You can listen to it and get caught up on statewide news. We launched a new email newsletter, also called Wisconsin Today, that you can sign up for at WPR.org. And that's another way we're putting stories out there. We are investing in the digital experience for Wisconsinites. Our website we revamped in the last year. I know you asked for a short answer. I could go on, but yes, we are looking across
I'm against the
digital.
clock, as you guys can understand. John, I want to get to this because, I think of Wisconsin Public Television, PBS Wisconsin now. I think of, becoming or being Bucky, the story of Bucky Badger. That's something you're not going to get anyplace else. One of the questions is, why do we need public broadcasting when we have a million choices out there in the streamosphere? Your thoughts?
Well, I think I'll give you another example coming up, and Ken Burns' next epic is the American Revolution. During that week of that broadcasting, let me just repeat that. During that week of that broadcast and the online streams of this and the many ways that people will watch it, more people in that week will learn about the American Revolution than has ever happened in the history of this country. Okay, I feel like I need to repeat that. More people will learn about the American Revolution. We think that's important. In Wisconsin, we are going to be working with partners of libraries, museums. The Wisconsin Historical Society and the Veterans Museum are key partners who are providing materials and will convene conversations in communities across the state. Okay, so when I hear people say, we have YouTube, we don't need it anymore. I'm like, I have a 4-year-old granddaughter. That is not true. I think about, I haven't seen YouTube in our communities. I haven't, it's wonderful. YouTube is a great way for us to get our content out to people. It has been very successful. But YouTube, Netflix are not local. They do not bring local news. They do not engage and use the tools of media as we've done. Todd, about our veteran service. We're the Vietnam veteran, a major effort in Wisconsin to capture those stories, to engage communities, and to have veterans be proud of their service and share their story. Netflix, YouTube, this wonderful service. There's great stuff there. None of that is replacing what public media means in Wisconsin and across the country.
About a month ago or so, I was just sitting home and I was not feeling that great, and I turned on PBS Wisconsin. this Wisconsin Lighthouse series is
Mhm.
phenomenal. I mean, you're not
Yeah.
going to find that anywhere else. And you learn history, and it's entertaining, and it's beautifully shot. Jerry Apps, Meet You at the Fair, Wisconsin Hometown Story. I mean, these are things you're only going to find on Wisconsin Public Television, PBS Wisconsin, sorry.
And let me add one thing too, is that
30 seconds.
that is the equivalent for education in Wisconsin too, around history and things. We are producing things for the classroom about Wisconsin that nobody else is.
Make your donation
And
now
it's
to
free.
PBS Wisconsin. We'll throw in a free, just a bit outside movie nights. I couldn't resist myself.
Thank you, Todd.
Thanks, John
1-800.
Miskowski and Sarah Ashworth. We appreciate you so much.
Thank
Stay
you.
tuned. Hour 2 is next.